Hey everyone, today I want to talk about the envelope, filter, and filter envelope. They all work a little bit differently on drum tracks, melodic synth tracks, and melodic sample tracks, as well as on aux tracks. So I just want to make sure that I'm covering quite a bit in this video. And honestly, I've been really surprised by a lot of what I've learned and what I've found out while just outlining, testing, and recording for this video. I've actually changed my approach to drum tracks quite a bit just based off of what I've learned in the process. First, I want to talk about the drum track envelopes. So drum tracks kind of have two envelopes. You get an overall envelope that is applied to every single sample on this track, and you get an envelope for each sample that you can adjust, either adding some attack or some release to your samples. We'll get to that in just 1 second though. So the way that this envelope works is that you have 4 parameters. The first, you can see the waveform of the last played sample over there. The first one is going to be the start of the sample. So where does it start playing that sample back? The second is how long does it take to get to full volume? Does it just play the sample at full volume from the beginning, or does it take a second? The third is going to be hold. So we've got start, attack, and hold. Hold is how much of the sample do you want to play? And then decay is after you're done playing the spot that I wanted to play of the sample, how long until the sample is silent? So with this, you can shape quite a bit, and there's a lot of possibilities, especially if you're using a drum track for like a loop or for something other than drums. But like I said, we'll get to that in a second. But first, I'm going to go to M1 so that I can see individual sounds, and I'm going to hold down Shift and adjust the third encoder. So this is going to add attack, which we just saw on that last page. Basically, how long until this gets to its loudest point. I could also press down in the third encoder, press down, and I can adjust how long it fades out for. Now, this is kind of neat because if I make this at the maximum, let's go back to this envelope on M2, and I'm going to make it so that I'm going to turn off the decay and make it so the hold is very short. But it sounds pretty similar, right? But if I play anything else, this one sounds normal because we have that extra envelope added to it from the M1 page. So let's go here, do the same thing, hit M1, hold Shift. I'm going to tap this third encoder, and I'm going to make this the maximum. Perfect. Now we have the whole sound. So I find that to be very, very helpful. I also think that this is really helpful if you want to play any sort of like longer sample, like maybe a loop or something like that. So I'm going to quickly load up some examples here. So I have this kit full of like the really fast talking fine print at the end of a bunch of radio ads.
Coverage options are selected by the customer.
That sort of thing. So I am going to just show you kind of what I mean here. So what if I want this to gradually fade in? Well, I could just adjust this sample's attack to being 99.
Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
If I don't want it to play all the way through,
coverage options are
I could make it so that it gradually decreases after the beginning.
Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability.
And it basically is adding a release to this that I don't have on the actual envelope.
Coverage options are selected by the customer.
Which is kind of neat. But if I change it back to a one-shot, of course, it's not going to make a huge difference, but it will make a difference if I do the attack.
Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
Before we move on, I have one more trick to show you, and that's just going to be if I just copy this boop kit over here, then I'm going to make it so that the envelope is what it was by default. Always takes me a second. If I assign the LFO, so I'm going to go to M4, hold Shift, and hit M4. Yes, I'll keep the random one on. I am going to randomly turn the third encoder to be the envelope. I'm going to randomly change the amount of the attack. And what this can do is, let's say I've got like kind of a snare roll. It can make it so that it's really unpredictable and sounds a bit more kind of human. Not exactly human, but a little human. So let's just get some of these. So you can hear how it's just kind of like varying the attack a little bit. It's a bit unpredictable, but my point is that if you put an LFO on this, it can just give it a very interesting kind of sound. You could also vary the start point, but I've had a bit more issues with that just sounding way too chaotic. Kind of cool. But I've gotten a lot more like pops and stuff by doing it this way, even if I've added an attack to the sample. Okay, so let's move on to melodic tracks. We'll be returning to drum tracks in a bit, but I just want to talk about the envelope on a melodic track before we get there. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull up this preset on track 5. If I go to M2, which is where the envelope is located, we can see a similar looking envelope to the drum tracks, but it works a bit differently. It's a standard, what's called an ADSR envelope, which just means we still have that first parameter attack, which is how long it takes to reach full volume. We have that second parameter. We have the second parameter decay, which determines how long is it going to go from when it first hits that peak until the volume it stays at as you hold it. The third parameter is sustain, which is the volume it stays at as you hold it. So if I turn that off, nothing. If I turn that on, quite a bit. If I turn it off completely and increase decay, that'll sound fine, but if I turn off release, which is how long it keeps playing after I let go, it might not sound as good. However, if I increase release, it'll give it this very kind of plucky sound. So this type of envelope would work for making basically anything plucky. You could also just make this, hold full volume, or you could make this more like a pad where it gradually fades in. Similar to the drum track, we have some per sample settings that we're able to change here. So if I were to go and open up one of the engines from the sampler engine here, I've got a couple more things that I've got one more thing I can actually change here. And that is based off of the loop in and loop out points. So I'm able to control which part of the sample starts where in the sampler engine. I'm also able to control which parts loop. This is where the loop begins and this is where it ends. And this is where the whole sample ends, right? And what happens if I hold these down, it's going to keep repeating that part. Now, I'm going to increase the amplitude, the sustain on the amplitude, so that way we can keep hearing what's happening. It's going to keep repeating the points between the loop in and loop out. And let's make it really quick to exaggerate it. And what's happening is as I'm holding this down, it is just repeating that mid part, and then when I let go, it plays the rest of the sample. But let's just make this really obnoxious. I'm going to make it so it's just the loop points are too close. And we can hear this weird sound going on. And that's just kind of like a weird popping sound. But once we let go, it goes away. And if I hold shift, I can see that third parameter there is once again doing something. And this is the setting for it to loop the loop points, but then once I let it go, it'll play the rest of the sample. If I press the third encoder down again and I get that little infinity sign, even during the release phase, so even after I let this go, even after I let go of the chord, it's going to continue to just play between the loop in and loop out points. The last option is going to be just having that loop completely off, in which case holding these down will do nothing. I guess it'll make it so it goes through the decay a little bit longer, but it's not going to change the part of the sample that it's playing or loop or anything like that. Now let's talk about the filters, which is when things get really, really especially cool. So I'm going to hit M3 on this same track I was just on. This is what the filter page looks like. There are 4 types of filters, but before we even get to those, I'm going to talk about one that I think is maybe more important. Hold shift and hit the instrument button. We have this high pass value here, and even though it's not visually represented like the filter on M3, we are able to clearly hear that it's doing something. When it says high pass, that's saying only the high notes are allowed to pass through this filter, and everything that is below the high pass is going to be taken out. So as I turn this up, you'll hear the low frequencies being taken out. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because if I scramble this preset, it will not change this high pass value. But similarly, if I'm having issues with getting the filter to behave or act in a predictable way, it might be that this setting, the high pass setting right there, might be on. And in that case, it doesn't matter. It's going to filter out those bass frequencies, even if you're, not doing that with the other filter. So I find this very helpful and I use it all the time, but it can also be a bit of a pain if it's enabled and you don't realize it. Okay, so back to M3, which is where our main filter is. There are 4 controls that we have for this filter, and they are going to be cutoff, which is the frequency that before and after which it's going to apply the filter. Resonance, which is how much it's going to boost the frequency right before that filter, right before the cutoff point. So let me just mess with the cutoff point in case you're not familiar with what this sounds like. So no difference. Big difference. Can't hear it at all. And then with resonance, we're going to hear the point right where it's being cut off, especially loud. This type of filter is called a low pass filter because, opposite of the high pass filter, this only allows everything lower than the cutoff point to go through the filter, and everything else gets taken out of the signal. There are 4 types of filters here, and you can access them by either holding Shift and tapping M3, or by pressing the first encoder button here. And you can see in the top left corner, it's going to go from SVF, which is state variable filter, to ladder, Z low pass, and Z high pass. Now, the biggest difference, as far as I can tell, between the state variable filter, ladder, and Z filter is the sound of their cutoff, or of their resonance. So here's what the resonance sounds like on the state variable. Ladder is a bit more aggressive. Then we have the Z low pass. We also have the Z high pass, which could be thought of being kind of redundant with the high pass filter here, except here we get a resonance point, and that can be kind of helpful. Because if we really want to have everything above a certain point and really want that lowest part of it to be emphasized, this is kind of our best way of doing that, because we can't set the resonance in the preset options. So we just covered the cutoff and resonance, and it's very common to assign those to different sources of modulation, and you can do that by holding Shift, opening this preset menu, and going to mod. There are 2 more parameters that I want to talk about. I'm going to skip, though, and first talk about this 4th encoder. So this 4th encoder is what's called Keytracking, and it's represented by this little arrow here that shows minimal Keytracking, of course, minimal Keytracking all the way to maximal Keytracking. And what Keytracking does is it means that the cutoff is also influenced by the pitch of the note that you're playing. So as you play lower notes, that cutoff is way lower, and as you play higher notes, the cutoff is much higher. So this can be actually pretty helpful. So I'm going to add some resonance so we can definitely hear it. I can't, like for instance, I can't really hear this note up here, right? But if I add some key tracking, I still get a lot of that resonance down there. But I can also play these notes. Those are definitely frequencies that would be filtered out by this, but because we have Keytracking on, it's moving the cutoff. This gets really cool once we get to the drum track, but that's just a second away. First, I want to talk about the filter envelope, and that is going to be partly controlled by the 3rd parameter on this page. So I'm going to turn this really far clockwise, and we can see this kind of shaded slash, I don't know, these lines going across the screen. That's representing where the cutoff point is starting with the filter envelope. I open the filter envelope by hitting M2 and tapping this first encoder, and I can see that this filter is now all the way up. So what if we have it gradually add in that filter? I'm going to go back to the amplitude envelope, and I'm going to just make it all just one level, just to make it really obvious what we're hearing the filter do. And let me also turn off key tracking. I just realized that's an important part of this too. So we can kind of hear it moving through those frequencies, getting a bit higher. I could also make it so that it starts off high and then it fades to nothing. And so it's basically just sweeping the cutoff from this point back there based off of the filter envelope. And I just find this to be really cool and pretty helpful, especially if you just want a sound to stand out at the very beginning. You could add a really resonant filter that's really, really short, and it's just going to add a bit of like a kind of pop or a bit more like of a transient when you play it. Okay, that's all I had to share about the melodic tracks. So let's go back to the drum tracks, and then we're going to go over the drum track filter envelope, then we'll talk about the aux track filters, which work a little bit differently. So let's go back to our drum track here. And I'm going to just reload the boop kit. Now, my tendency so far has been to say track 1 is the kick track, track 2 is the snare track 3 is for hi-hats, cymbals, and toms, and all that stuff. But you'll notice that the XY, all their built-in kits have every type of, like have a full kit, right? They've got the kick, the snare, they've got a hi-hat, they've got, you know, toms, perks, all that good stuff, right? But if they all go through the same envelope and the same filter, that makes things a bit tricky. I already discussed a little bit about how you could have your envelope vary between different samples and different keys, but you're still going to run into that same issue with the filter, which is that if I turn off key tracking and the filter envelope, let's say I just adjust it for my kick. And what if I want it really resonant to make that kick nice and loud? I could add a bit of the envelope. And in fact, what I could do there is let's just go ahead and change that envelope. So just like with the melodic tracks, I'm going to go to M2. The only difference is it doesn't show you both envelopes at once. So I'm going to tap this, and now we're at the filter envelope. I'm just going to increase the cutoff a little bit. Let's say that for some reason, that's exactly what we want for our kick and our snare. Well, we won't be able to hear our hi-hats. They'll be really muted. And this is where key tracking comes in handy quite a bit. I was originally in this outline going to make fun of them for including key tracking on the drum kits, but then I realized, holy crap, if I set the resonance and the cutoff to work with my snare, then I can just enable key tracking and get a bit more clarity on these. And I find this especially helpful for a kit that I've been using a little bit lately, because it's just such a big sound. And there's like a lot of clipping in these because I don't know what I'm doing. But if I add in this filter, oh boy. And then I'm just going to go ahead and go over and just increase the key tracking. We don't have that same issue. as you might imagine, if it's key tracking, that's going to be a little bit different on every single step, right? So if I sequence these hi-hats here, this kick, let's just do that. And let's just do this snare here and here. It's not going to be super consistent, right? Because sometimes it's going to be playing, like this is going to be playing that note and that note at the same time. So how's it going to do that? How's it going to determine where to set the cutoff? And I'm not sure exactly how it does it, but the fact that it's inconsistent, I think actually adds something to this sound that fits what I'm going for, but might not fit what you're going for. Last topic in this already way too long video. This is what happens. I do like these deep dives and then suddenly I'm like, oh crap, there's just way too much to talk about as I'm learning stuff. So I'm going to open up my aux tracks, and there are 4 tracks here that have a filter on them. We've got the IO track, that's just what I'm going to call that. I don't know what it's actually called. The tape track, and then the effects tracks. The effects tracks might be the most obvious. So let's go ahead and from our reverb, I'm going to go to M2 and I'm going to make it so that way we're hearing. We've got a lot of send from the drum track. And what I could do here is I could turn on the filter, and these two right here, encoders 3 and 4, don't really do anything here, at least not right now. But encoders 1 and 4 control the high pass and low pass. And it's just affecting the effects track. So if I wanted this like rumbly thing, I could do that. Same type of filter on FX1. And it's the same basic concept on the tape track here, where it's going to filter out the output of the tape playback. So it's not filtering in the incoming audio, it's filtering in the audio outgoing from the tape track. This, I believe, filters incoming audio, but does not apply the filter to outgoing audio. So I had that in my notes and I said it pretty confidently, but I actually don't know if I've tested that out. So I've brought out my OPZ just to help me figure out, okay, is that actually what's happening? So I will just, let's just latch that, go up here, turn in the right input. Cool, so we can hear it. And if I go to filter, yeah, it's filtering that incoming audio. Okay, so that was a lot to cover, and I really appreciate you watching this. I just can't believe how much I was learning as I was going through and messing around with the different filters and envelopes and trying the different settings and stuff. And then I would have like some question or assumption, and I'd be like, wait, maybe I should actually try that. And it, my assumption would be incorrect. So this has just been a really big learning experience for me. And so I hope that this has been equally helpful for you. Please let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to email me or sign up at my Patreon if you're interested in one-on-one lessons. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.